Has started exhuming the remains of people killed in a government massacre in the 1980s. The remains of a 21-year-old woman were the first to be exhumed. She and her husband were shot dead and buried in a shallow grave.
The killings occurred when the former president Robert Mugabe sent a North Korean trained unit to Matabeleland and Midlands provinces to fight against alleged dissidents. The code name of the operation was Kukura Hundi, which means the rain that washes away the chaff. President Emmerson Mnangagwa was State Minister for Security during the time of the massacres.
Joining us now is Zimbabwe journalist Zenzele Ndebele. Zenzele, good evening and thank you so much for joining us on The Globe. Now, first off, what prompted the decision to exhume these bodies?
For the past 36 years, the people of Matabeleland have been putting pressure on the government to allow relatives of those who died during that time some of them to be reburied because they are in shallow graves. Others, people don't know where they were buried, so relatives want to identify the wherever they are so that they can bring them home. So some of these processes or these reburials have been happening over years, but they would do one by exhumation. The government will stop them and it would start. So it is because the relatives want to give proper burial to these people. Taking, for example, this couple that was killed in 1983, a young couple, the man was 30, the woman was 21. They were buried they were killed 19 kilometers from their home area trying to escape to town. They left a son who was 2 years old. He never knew them, and he is the one who requested that his parents be exhumed and be buried in a proper way so that he can also get a time to mourn his parents.
Now, when is the process expected to conclude and what does it entail?
Basically, there is no clear roadmap on what needs to be done because a lot of things have not been happening. People they want an apology from the government. That apology is not coming. There was the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, which was set up, which is supposed to deal with these issues. It has been holding meetings with communities, but it's really not clear what it's going to do. It doesn't have a justice element in it. It doesn't have a truth-telling in it. So this is a process that might take forever because there is no clear roadmap on what needs to be done and when, who needs to do what. So Ukutula Trust, for example, is an organization that deals with these issues in the process that they call Healing the Dead, and they've been doing these things, basically taking requests from families. So families that want reburials, they approach them and then they do exhumations and reburials. So it's not clear when this process will end.
Now, when you say they approach the families and do reburials, do they know exactly which family's members is buried? Do they have a database of where they buried these people? Or is it a process of having to exhume the bodies, do identification, go through that process, and then only the reburials are done? Just take us through the process.
So basically what happens is that a family which knows where their relative was killed and buried would approach Ukutula Trust. So what happens is that during that time, for example, this couple that was exhumed on Sunday, they were killed from 19 kilometers from their home. They were buried by 5 villagers, and one of the villagers then communicated to that family that your kids were killed, or your family members were killed, and they're buried here. So for the past 36 years, they have known where the couple is, but they could not get permission to rebury them. So what then happens is that they will then approach this organization to say, we have a family member or we have family members that were killed and buried there, and we need to exhume them to do reburials. So there's a process that goes through. They want to verify from them to say, well, how do you know that they are family? The last day you saw them, what were they wearing? Those who buried them, who are they? So in this process, we went before the exhumation actually happened. We talked to the person who buried them. He told us that the woman was carrying a handbag, she had an umbrella, the man he was carrying a radio, and we buried them with all these things. So during the exhumation process, when they finally got to where the bones were, they located the handbag and the umbrella. They also also uncovered the radio. The man had an ID in his pocket, so that then matched what was described. So in some cases, if you don't get that information before the exhumation, you might then exhume the wrong person. It's not an easy process because sometimes these people were buried in a hurry. They could have exchanged graves and all those kind of things. So you need to have that kind of information before you can do an exhumation. And not everyone will be exhumed because some people were just buried by strangers and they don't know who were they and where they were from.
Now, Zenzele, what's the general feeling amongst the Zimbabweans about this?
Well, 36 years later, people are still very angry. They're traumatized about this. So what happened? I mean, on Sunday, when actually they finally reached to the skeletons and they were just there, and the family was invited to come and inspect. It actually resembled a funeral because 36 years later, the family had to see these people in that state for the first time. They really finally confirmed that, of course, is them and they're dead. So there is really that anger that is still within the people that 36 years the government of Zimbabwe has not apologized. The people who were in the forefront of the 50th Brigade, President Emerson Mnangagwa, Terence Shiri, Chiwenga, they are still in power. They're the ones who are running the show now. And really they don't have hope of ever getting justice because those who are in power are not going to take themselves to court and actually, punish themselves for what they did. So it's one issue that is a thorn in the government of Zimbabwe, and it's one issue that is dividing Zimbabweans, and I don't see it being solved anytime soon.
Now, very quickly, Zenzele, have you managed to speak to some of the families of those who lost their lives during this time?
Yes, I have talked to a number of people who lost their relatives. Like on that particular day on Sunday, I talked to the brother of the man who was killed, and they said he was happy that his brother was finally exhumed. I also talked to the young sister of the lady who was killed, and she said back then she was young, she was still at school, but finally she finds peace in the sense that she now knows that her sister was killed, and they can give a respectable burial 36 years later.
Zenzele, thank you so much for joining us. We'll leave it there for now. That is a Zimbabwean journalist, Zenzele Ndebele, joining us there.